$85 million, my daughter-in-law Chloe said, lifting her champagne flute. Congratulations, Dad, for finally taking it easy. I cut into my steak. Taking it easy? Or waiting to die so you two can carve it up? Silence fell sharp as my knife. My son, Ethan, looked ready to pass out. Dad, quiet, Ethan, I said without looking at him. My eyes stayed on Chloe. You think I don't know? About that so-called geriatric specialist? About your searches on how to make an old heart stop naturally? Her face went white as paper. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do, I said, as the phone in my pocket began to buzz. It was time. I built this empire from nothing, and I'll be the one to level it to the ground. Over 99% of viewers just sat through this story without clicking, like, or subscribe. Actually, it's easy, just one tap. What time is it in your area? And where are you listening? $85 million has a taste all its own. It doesn't smell like the leather interior of a new car, or the cedar of a fine cigar box. It tastes like the New York strip I've ordered at Delmonico's for the past 30 years medium rare, sprinkled with a pinch of coarse sea salt, served on a thick, piping hot porcelain plate. Consistency. That's the real flavor of success. I looked at the two people across from me. Calling them kids wasn't quite right. Ethan, my only son, was 38, and his wife Chloe, about the same. But to me, they were still children playing dress up in the adult world. They'd ordered lobster thermidor and beef Wellington dishes with names that required more than one kind of knife and fork. I never understood the appeal of fighting your food. Congratulations, Dad, Chloe said, lifting her flute of champagne. Tiny bubbles danced in the thin crystal glass. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was too bright, too polished, like a marble countertop. Smooth, perfect, and cold to the touch. For finally learning how to enjoy yourself. I just nodded and took a sip of whiskey. Enjoy myself. She thought 40 years of 4 a.m., wake-ups, union disputes, safety inspections, and Chicago winters were all just the prologue to enjoyment. She didn't get it. For a man like me, hard work is enjoyment. It's the only real thing left in a world full of empty promises. Ethan raised his own glass, the 18-year-old scotch I'd given him last Christmas. Here's to you, Dad, he said, sounding genuinely sincere, for building something great, something we can keep building on. That word hung in the air, as if 40 years of sweat and dust were nothing but scaffolding for their palace. I'd built Hayes Construction from a rusted-out Ford pickup and a pair of calloused hands. Now the name was carved into the skyline itself, and they called it something to build on, as if they even knew which end of a hammer to hold. Thanks, I said dryly. Ethan's laugh came out too loud for a quiet restaurant, the kind of laugh that tries to fill a silence only the two of us could hear. He turned to Chloe. You know, sweetheart, with this deal done, maybe it's time to upgrade the kitchen. What about a bigger island? Chloe patted his hand. Don't be greedy, Ethan. Let your father enjoy his moment. She always said the right thing, always put on a flawless performance. Across the room sat Henderson, my old rival. We were old enough now to call each other friends. He nodded at me, a small gesture of respect between men who'd fought the same wars. I wondered what he saw a proud father celebrating with his family, or an old lion surrounded by a pair of hungry hyenas who didn't know he still had teeth. That's when the phone in my jacket vibrated quietly. It only buzzed for one number. I glanced at the screen. Evelyn Reed, attorney. This was it. The signal. I set my napkin down carefully. Excuse me, I need to take this. Ethan looked relieved for the break. No problem, Dad. Probably the final paperwork. As I walked down the marble hallway toward the restrooms, I pressed the phone to my ear. Everything I'd suspected for the past 6 months, every uneasy thought, every overly sweet word was about to be confirmed or denied. And I knew, with the instincts of a man who's laid hundreds of foundations, that this one had been rotting for years. Evelyn, I said softly. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was tension underneath. Arthur, the investigator's final report just came in. It's worse than we thought. We have confirmation. I closed my eyes. No shock, no surprise. Just a cold, heavy certainty, the kind a structural engineer feels when he spots a fatal crack in the load-bearing beam. The building will fall. The only question is when. I understand, I said. Thank you, Evelyn. Arthur, we should proceed with phase one. I cut her off, voice steady and flat. Silence for a beat. Then, understood. Enjoy your dinner, Arthur. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the gilded mirror. A 68-year-old man in an expensive suit, looking tired. But my eyes were clear. When I returned, Ethan and Chloe were whispering. They stopped the moment they saw me. Chloe smiled that same perfect smile. Everything okay, Dad? I sat down and lifted my glass. Everything's fine, just tying up a few loose ends. I raised the whiskey toward them, meeting both their eyes. Well then, here's to new beginnings. They lifted their glasses, smiles soft with relief. They thought tonight was a celebration. They didn't know it was an indictment. And I, Arthur Hayes, was the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner. Every collapse begins with a single crack, usually in the place you least expect. For me, that crack appeared 6 months ago, not in a wall of concrete, but on a piece of paper. An invoice, it came mixed in with the usual mail, wedged between the glossy sailboat catalog and a letter from the symphony asking for donations. The bill was from a place called North Shore Senior Wellness Clinic, a name that managed to sound both caring and vaguely insulting. I had never set foot in any place like that. My doctor was Jim Peterson, a man I've played golf with for 20 years. We discussed blood pressure and golf handicaps in the same breath. I looked at the charge. $450 for an initial consultation. I was about to toss it in the trash, assuming it was a mistake, when something made me stop. Instinct. The same instinct that had once told me a subcontractor was cutting corners with cheap steel, or that a politician was lying even when his lips didn't move. That Sunday night, during our weekly family dinner, I handed the bill to Ethan. Is this yours? I asked casually. He snatched the paper as if it were radioactive. His eyes skimmed the lines, and for a fleeting second, I saw panic. Oh, must have been sent by mistake, Dad, he said, forcing a laugh. But his glance half a second toward Chloe was all the confession I needed. Chloe didn't flinch. She simply placed a hand over his, calm and measured. Probably a mix-up with address, sweetheart, she said smoothly. I'll call them tomorrow. They thought I let it go. They thought that at 68, my mind had started to dull. They were wrong. The next morning, I didn't throw that bill away. I called Evelyn Reed. Now, 6 months later, I'm sitting in Evelyn's office, looking at the result of that phone call. Her firm occupies the 40th floor of the John Hancock building, one of the first projects my company ever worked on as a subcontractor. From her window, I can see the whole city. A quilt of concrete and steel I helped stitch together. On the mahogany desk between us lies a thick, bound folder. The cover bears only one title, Foundation Campaign. Evelyn isn't one for flourishes. She got straight to it. We started with that invoice, Arthur, she said, sliding the file toward me. My investigator, a retired Chicago detective, looked into that clinic. It's not a medical facility. It's a front run by a man named Dr. Ellen Shore, whose license was revoked 3 years ago for insurance fraud. I turned the first page. A photo stared back Chloe, leaving the clinic, sunglasses on, looking like she'd just finished a round of shopping. Chloe went there 3 times. Evelyn continued, her voice steady, clinical. The first visit, she met Shore. The next 2, she brought Ethan. They paid in cash. I kept flipping through pages, bank statements, appointment logs. They built a fake medical record for you, Arthur, she said. A detailed file, filled with carefully fabricated symptoms, short-term memory loss, confusion, early signs of cognitive decline. I stopped at a page filled with neat handwriting Chloe's. She had listed moments I'd forgotten someone's name or lost track during a conversation, ordinary slips of aging, twisted into evidence of a disease that didn't exist. What was their plan, I asked, though I already knew. To wait until the company sale closed, Evelyn said. Then they'd use the file, along with Shore's testimony, to petition the court for conservatorship. They'd claim you were no longer mentally fit to manage your assets. They wouldn't seize it outright. Chloe's smarter than that. She'd become your guardian, protecting the estate for your future. A perfect plan, cruel, and nearly flawless. But that wasn't the worst of it. Evelyn flipped to the final section. My investigator also put Chloe's laptop search history, she said quietly. She'd spent weeks researching lisinopril, my blood pressure medication, the same pill I'd taken every morning for 10 years. She searched terms like undetectable lisinopril overdose, lisinopril poisoning symptoms, and drug interactions causing cardiac arrest. Evelyn read, her voice trembling now. Their plan B wasn't the court, Arthur. It was a heart attack that looked natural. A tragic accident and aging man under stress after a major business deal. I closed the folder. The room was silent, except for the faint wail of traffic below. Evelyn had been right. It was worse than we thought. This wasn't just greed. It was blueprints for my death, drafted by my own son and daughter-in-law. Evelyn said nothing more. She knew I needed a moment. My eyes wandered to a framed photo on her desk, the one she always kept there. Mary, my late wife, standing beside Evelyn at a charity gala years ago. Mary's smile could have lit up this entire room. She adored Ethan. She welcomed Chloe like a daughter. I pointed at the photo. She trusted that boy, I said softly. She loved that girl. This isn't about the money, Evelyn. I rose, walked to the window, and looked down at the city I had built. This is about the insult to her memory. When I turned back, the pain was gone. What replaced it was steel, cold, and certain. Phase 1 is complete, I said. Prepare for phase 2. The next morning, I wasn't in my corner office or at the golf club. I was in the wood shop, a converted old shed behind the house. The smell of pine and linseed oil always settles me. It's an honest smell. Wood doesn't lie. You can plane it, cut it, join it back together, but its nature, the grain and the rings always shows through. People aren't like that. I was planing a piece of oak, thin curls gathering beneath the sharp iron. I wasn't in a hurry. I was waiting. At 9 o'clock sharp, Evelyn would call the bank, one call to the lending department. 30 seconds. That's all it takes to turn their Lake Geneva dream home into a nightmare of paperwork. They think the fight is about big, showy moves. They don't understand that real power lives in the smallest details in the signatures on a single line. At 9:47, my phone rang. I knew it was them before I checked the screen. I let it ring 3 times, then answered, calm as a pond. Hello? Dad! Ethan's voice was ragged with panic. I could hear his breathing hot, wet, and fast. Dad, something happened. The bank, they just emailed. The mortgage application, it got rejected. I think fruit. Behind him, Chloe's voice cut in, sharp as broken glass. Ask him, Ethan, ask him why. I hit speaker, set the phone on the workbench, and went back to my playing. The steady chef of the blade would be the soundtrack to this conversation. Rejected? I said lightly. That's odd. Did they give a reason? They said the co-signer withdrew financial support. Dad, did you do that? He sounded genuinely baffled, as if the thought couldn't quite land. Ah, I said, brushing sawdust from my hands. After the sale, Evelyn advised me to review all major commitments. You know, tidy things up. Strictly housekeeping, Ethan. Nothing personal. I could almost hear his mind grinding through the logic. My explanation made just enough sense to throw him off balance. Housekeeping? But we were almost done. We already picked out paint colors, Dad. Paint colors. Lord help me. I understand, son, I said with sympathy. But it's a substantial loan. Evelyn just wants to make sure everything's handled properly. In fact, I think the 3 of us should sit down with her, make sure it's all transparent for your future. Silence. A razor-thin silence from Chloe, and the sound of her gears locking tight. I could picture it. Recalculations in real time. Good. Let her calculate. There was a rustle, and then Chloe's voice, cool and controlled, she'd taken the phone. What exactly do you mean by transparent, Arthur? You promised that house. That was your late wedding gift. Chloe, I said gently, as if to a child in a sulk. Promises are built on trust, just like a house sits on a sound foundation. Lately, I have reason to recheck the footings on a few things. This is business. I paused, then slid the wedge. Ethan understands. He's been in the company long enough to know how process works. Right, son? I'd tossed the ball back to Ethan. Now he was pinned. Agree with me, and he crosses his wife. Side with her, and he looks like a fool who doesn't understand business. He stumbled. Yes, I get it, Dad. But what, Ethan? Chloe snapped, anger now playing. You're going to let him do this? There's nothing to do, Chloe, I said, ending their argument for them. This is a discussion. Next week, Evelyn's office. Tuesday, 10 a.m. We'll go through everything together. I'm sure we'll find a solution. Our inness. I hung up before they could say another word. I set the plane down and lifted the oak board. It was smooth under my palm. I'd opened a crack in their alliance. Small, but enough to start. Chloe wanted a fight. Ethan wanted a truce. That difference, like a wedge, would work its way in and split them apart. What I felt wasn't joy. Joy died with Mary. What I felt was a cold satisfaction, the clean result of a plan executed the right way. The first domino had tipped, and I knew, with the certainty of a man who'd help raise a city, the rest would follow. I suggested meeting them at a restaurant, but Chloe insisted on coming to my house. Let us cook dinner for you, she said over the phone. Voice sweet as honey. We just want to take care of you, Dad. I knew what she really meant. They wanted to enter my territory, to observe, to assess, to look for weakness. I agreed. A smart hunter always lets the prey walk willingly into the trap. Dinner was a clumsy performance. They brought beef Wellington, obviously store-bought from some upscale market, pretending they'd made it themselves. The air was so heavy you could slice it with a knife. Chloe tried to make small talk, ask about retirement plans, about golf courses in Florida, about travel. She was painting the picture of a harmless old man, content to spend his twilight years draining what was left of his fortune. I let her talk. I ate my own ribeye, watched them both, watched Ethan avoid my eyes, watched Chloe glance again and again at the phone lying face down on the table. They were nervous, good. After the main course, in the thick silence that followed, I decided it was time for strike two. That conversation with Evelyn got me thinking. I began evenly about legacy, about what all this really means. They straightened in their chairs thinking, no doubt, I was talking about the lake house. So I've made a decision, I said. After reviewing my finances, I'm allocating $40 million to create the Hayes Skilled Trades Scholarship Fund. Silence. Chloe's wineglass froze midair. Ethan's face went pale, as if someone had sucked the oxygen from the room. The fund will give full scholarships to young people who want to become carpenters, electricians, plumbers, people who build this country with their hands. I realize real legacy isn't what you leave to your family, but what you build for the community. Something that can't be sold, mismanaged, or forgotten. Each word landed like a slap. $40 million gone from their imagined inheritance. I could almost see the numbers evaporating behind their eyes. That's wonderful, Dad, Ethan stammered, trying to say the right thing. Very generous, Chloe added, her smile frozen stiff. Yes, I said. Now I can finally rest easy. I stood. Let's have coffee in the living room. As we sat on the leather sofas, I shifted gears. Security's been lousy around here lately, I said casually. Evelyn suggested I upgrade the camera system. I pointed to the small white domes at the room's corners. This company's excellent 4 Kelvin's resolution, night vision, everything uploaded to the cloud. Makes me feel safer. Ethan nodded automatically. Chloe said nothing, her eyes narrowing, calculating. I sipped my coffee, then added, as if the thought had just come to me. But the best part is the hidden ones. Technology's amazing these days. There's one right there in the smoke detector. I pointed to the white disc on the ceiling. The lens is tiny, you can't see it, but it records everything. 24/7's video and audio. Crystal clear. I didn't look at them directly, only glanced sideways. That was enough. In that single flicker of an exchange, one quick glance between them, I saw everything. Fear, suspicion, the silent question. Did you know? I'd planted the seed of lethal doubt. The camera, the unblinking eye, had turned this private space into a public stage, where every gesture might be evidence. To close the trap, I delivered the final line, my tone mild and innocent. Oh, By the way, were you two here last week while I was out? I checked the footage, saw your car parked outside. A lie. I hadn't checked the thing. I didn't even know if they'd been there. But that didn't matter. The silence that followed was no longer awkward. It was the silence of guilt, thick and airless. Chloe's face drained of color. Ethan looked sick. Yes, he managed. We stopped by just to make sure everything was okay. That's good, I said, smiling without warmth. It's nice to know you're looking out for me. Father all's in by. That question would haunt them now. What did he see? What did he hear? How much does he know? Uncertainty would gnaw at them from the inside more efficiently than any accusation. Dinner was over, and as I watched them hurry out the door, I knew they wouldn't sleep well again. Their plan was off balance now, and from this point on, it wouldn't be greed guiding them. It would be fear. The Drake Hotel's ballroom glittered under the chandeliers. About 300 people had gathered, everyone who was anyone in Chicago. The mayor, the big developers, charity presidents in ropes of pearls, all here to watch Arthur Hayes, the retired construction king, give back. I spotted Ethan and Chloe in the corner, animals backed into a wall. They'd had to show up. Staying away would read like a confession. Ethan looked pale, tugging at his tie as if it were choking him. Chloe was the opposite confidence, worn like armor, a striking red dress, a smile pasted firmly in place, but I saw the tension at the corner of her mouth, the white-knuckle grip on her champagne flute. She didn't know what was coming, only that something was. After the mayor's long remarks and the bank chairman's speech, it was my turn. I walked to the stage, not with swagger, but with a steady weight. I scanned the room, letting my gaze pass over familiar faces, and then stop at Ethan and Chloe's table. Thank you all for coming tonight. I began, warm and even. When I started 40 years ago with a pickup truck and a toolbox, I never imagined I'd be standing here. I spoke about Mary, my late wife, the one who believed in me when I had nothing. I spoke about the men who worked with me in blazing heat and driving snow. I spoke about the honor of a promise, the strength of a well done right. The room grew quiet and listened. Legacy, I went on, my tone sharpening, isn't just the buildings you raise or the money you leave behind. Legacy is the values you defend. This fund was created to honor honest work and honor itself. I paused and let the silence stretch. It was also created to protect that legacy from those who see it as nothing more than a number on a balance sheet, people willing to do anything to take it. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd and died. I could feel the air shift. Hundreds of eyes, friends, partners, rivals began to drift toward Ethan and Chloe's table. It wasn't a gala anymore. It was a courtroom. And some, I said, voice cold as steel, have even tried to claim I was mentally unfit in order to seize it. And there is a way. The shock in the room was almost physical. Chloe went white. Ethan looked ready to faint. I didn't have to say their names. The city would handle that for me. In 30 seconds, their carefully curated reputation built on practiced smiles and strategic donations turned to ash. But I wasn't finished. Deception, ladies and gentlemen, has layers. I continued. Sometimes it isn't just after your assets. Sometimes it goes straight for the heart of your family. As a Frank, I nodded to the tag at the back. A photo bloomed on the two large screens flanking the stage. Not a legal brief, not a bank statement. A crystal clear image taken from a distance. Chloe in the same red dress she was wearing now, locked in a passionate kiss with a man. The man was Robert Reed, Evelyn's husband. The picture had been taken 2 weeks ago, during Chloe's business trip to New York. Evelyn's investigator, while tracking Chloe's shady financial moves, had stumbled onto a more personal betrayal. Chloe's plan wasn't just to strip me of my money. Her plan ended with leaving Ethan once she had it all. The room exhaled in a chorus of stunned breaths. I looked at my son. For the first time, he looked at Chloe without worship or fear, only shock and heartbreak. He saw it now. He wasn't just an accomplice. He was a fool. Their perfect wall had fallen away, exposing the rot within. I turned back to the microphone. No shouting, just calm, final words. The Hayes legacy was built on the bedrock of honor, I said. Some people chose to build something else. Now they can live in it. I set the mic down and stepped off the stage. I didn't look back. I walked straight through the crowd as it parted like water and out of the ballroom. All I heard was the sound of my own footsteps on the thick carpet. I closed the door on the past, not with anger, but with resolve. The work was done. The foundation was secure. And as I stepped into the cool Chicago night, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. People often imagine victory arrives with trumpets and celebration. In truth, it tastes like stale air in a long abandoned room. No sweetness, no thrill, only the sharp silence where my son's laughter used to live. A week had passed since the gala. My phone stayed quiet. No calls, no texts from Ethan. His absence now weighed heavier than his false presence ever had. I spent my days in the workshop, surrounded by the smell of linseed oil and oak, the only company that didn't lie. I could write a check big enough to buy the whole block, but not one that would buy a single phone call from my son. Power is a strange thing. It can move mountains, yet it can't fill the small hollows in your chest. The town, of course, wasn't quiet. Echoes of that night spread like ripples on the lake. Evelyn told me that at the country club, no one spoke Chloe's name anymore. She'd been erased from the social fabric more efficiently than any whiteout could manage. No longer a person, she'd become a parable, a cautionary tale mothers told their daughters about ambition misplaced. Rumor had it she packed up that very night and disappeared without a word. Ethan was different. The grocery boy said he left deliveries at the door. No one had seen him for weeks. The house once Chloe's bragging point in an architecture magazine had become his mausoleum. They were once the golden couple of North Shore. Now they were a whispered warning passed over glasses of Chardonnay. On a Tuesday morning, I decided I couldn't stay buried in sawdust forever. I drove to a small cafe in the old part of town, a place without lawyers or bankers, just tradesmen and students. I was staring out the window when I heard a familiar voice. Arthur? It was Evelyn. She looked different, no power suit, just jeans and a soft sweater. Her hair was tied back, and for the first time I noticed the shadows under her eyes. Evelyn, I said, surprised. Didn't expect to see you here. Ram ba do lai. Neither did I, she said with a strained smile. Just needed some air. An awkward quiet fell between us. We'd been allies in a war. Now that the war was over, we were just two people sharing a scar. Sit, I offered. She nodded and took the seat across from me. When the waiter came, she ordered chamomile tea. We sat for a while in silence, listening to the hum of grinders and low conversation. Evelyn spoke first. My husband, she said, staring into her cup as if it held the answer to everything. He moved out over the weekend. Didn't say a word, just left a note on the counter. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Don't be, she shook her head. Truth is still truth, no matter how it's exposed. What hurts? She lifted her eyes, pain flickering behind them, is that I, a divorce attorney, never saw it coming in my own home. I was so busy studying cracks in other people's foundations that I forgot to check my own. Sometimes, I said quietly, the hardest cracks to see are the ones closest to us. We didn't talk much about feelings after that. Instead, we talked logistics, divorce terms, asset division, procedural nonsense. But beneath the words was an unspoken understanding. Two survivors of a shipwreck sitting on the same piece of driftwood, trying to chart what comes next. That conversation, strangely enough, woke me up. I'd won, but now what? I couldn't spend the rest of my life planing boards in a workshop. Victory hadn't brought peace. Peace, like any structure, had to be built. Evelyn, I said finally, my tone shifting with new purpose. I need your help with the fund. She looked up, a flicker of surprise. I don't want it to be just a name on a check sent out every year. I went on, not another tax write-off. I want to build something. Something made of brick and steel. A place where young people can learn real skills. Where honor and hard work actually mean something. For the first time that morning, I saw a spark in her eyes. The sorrow was still there, but beneath it was the lawyer I knew, the woman who never backed down from a challenge. You're talking about a school? She asked. I'm talking about rebuilding something, I said. From the foundation up, the right way. ISD. She thought for a moment, then nodded once firmly. All right, Arthur, she said. Show me the blueprints. Over 99% of viewers just sat through this story without clicking like or subscribe. Actually, it's easy, just one tap. What time is it in your area and where are you listening? Turns out, tearing things down is a lot easier than building them. Wrecking Chloe and Ethan's lives took one evening. Drawing up a school, even on paper, took months. And I had never felt more alive. Evelyn's conference room, once stacked with evidence of deception, had become our design shop. The polished mahogany table disappeared under rows of plans, material samples, and takeout coffee cartons gone cold. As we unrolled the first set of drawings, a familiar calm washed over me. This was a language I understood. Concrete, steel, load path. No pretense, no hidden meanings. A wall is either plumb or it isn't. The HVAC needs to sit here on the east roof, I said, tapping the plan. Catch the prevailing wind off Lake Michigan. Done right will shave 20% off the energy bill. Evelyn, buried in a stack of zoning permits, looked up. I thought you were retired, Arthur. I tried, I said without looking up. Bored me to death. We found the rhythm. I handled the brick and mortar, the things you can touch. Evelyn handled words and rules, the things that can topple a project if you get them wrong. She was a fighter in a courtroom, but I learned quickly she was just as fierce across a city council table. Arthur, we can't use that contractor, she said one afternoon, skimming a bid file. 2 OSHA cases last year. They're the fastest and the cheapest. I shot back, out of old habit. She peered at me over her readers. The foundation of this project is honor, not speed. We do it right. I studied her for a long moment. Her ex-husband had no idea what he lost. I nodded. You're right. We do it right. Slowly, Evelyn changed. The gray power suits showed up less. Sometimes she arrived in dusty boots after a site visit, hair pulled back. She looked more tired, but her eyes were brighter, like an old building stripped of peeling paint to reveal its solid brick underneath. Our late working dinners became a habit. We ate pizza over the drawings and talked about everything from steel prices to the small wreckage of everyday life. One night, while we reviewed the millwork shop, I told her about my first hammer, a gift from my father, and how I used these hands to build Mary's and my first house. I didn't talk about Ethan, but when I spoke about passing those skills on, about the pride of watching a young person turn a rough block into something clean and true, we both knew who I meant, and we both knew it hadn't happened. Evelyn began to open up, too. She admitted she once wanted to be a prosecutor. White-collar crimes. No plea deals. But Robert, she said, using her ex-husband's name for the first time, thought that path was too intense. He wanted a quiet, suburban life. She shrugged. Funny how easily you can set your own dreams aside for someone who doesn't deserve them. In those moments, I realized we weren't just building a school. We were rebuilding something inside ourselves. On a damp Friday afternoon, just as we were wrapping for the week, Evelyn's assistant knocked and stepped in. Mr. Hayes, there's a letter for you, she said. A little uncertain. It was delivered here. She handed me a plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name on the front. The handwriting. I knew it instantly, slanted and careless. The same hand I'd seen on birthday cards and homework sheets. Ethan's. The room seemed to shrink. The rain beyond the windows suddenly sounded loud. I held the envelope, felt the weight of it, far heavier than paper has any right to be. It was the first contact in nearly 3 months. Evelyn watched me. Her face gave nothing away, but in her eyes I saw understanding. She didn't offer advice. She didn't prod. She simply stood there, a quiet point of balance. I stared at the envelope. Inside could be anything. An apology, an accusation, a plea, a curse. Each possibility was its own trail into a dark woods I wasn't sure I was ready to enter. I looked at Evelyn. She gave the smallest, knowing nod and began gathering her papers. I think we've done enough for today, she said softly. See you Monday, Arthur. She gave me space. She gave me the choice. And I sat alone in that office with the letter in my hand, facing a construction job harder than any building I'd ever raised. Whether to start testing the footing of a foundation that had already given way, I didn't read the letter right away. I brought it back to my workshop, set it on my desk beside an unfinished blueprint. For 2 days, it just sat there, a silent white rectangle that somehow shouted inside my head. It was a door leading back to a place I wasn't sure I wanted to return to, but I knew I couldn't leave it unopened forever. Uncertainty, I've learned, is worse than the worst truth. On Sunday night, I sat down, turned on the single lamp over my workbench, and tore the envelope open. Ethan's handwriting was hurried, feverish, like it had been wrestled onto the page rather than written. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I finally had the guts to send it, and you had enough pity to open it. I don't know where to begin, because rot doesn't have a beginning. It just spreads. You always said a man is measured by how solid his word is. If that's true, then I don't exist. I'm a ghost made of other people's lies and my own silence. I knew about Chloe and that man. For over a year now, I saw the messages when she was in the shower, words she never said to me lighting up her lock screen. I did nothing. I cleared the notification and put her phone back where it was, my heart pounding in my throat, because I was afraid of the silence that would follow more than of the truth itself. I chose warm lies over cold honesty. That's the choice of a coward. She knew, I knew. I'm sure of it. We never spoke of it, but it lived between us. That ugly secret that made her despise me more each day. And that contempt fed her plan, the one about your money. I had to stop and take a breath. The air in the shop felt heavy, cold. I kept reading. I was part of that plan. I won't lie about it anymore. I went with her to that doctor. I nodded while she spun stories about your failing memory. I did it because I was desperate to keep her and to prove something to you. I never felt like I could fill your shoes. You built an empire. I only knew how to spend from it. I thought if I could manage it, I'd finally earn your respect, even if I had to cheat to get it. But there was a line even for a coward like me. The pills, that was her idea. She said she'd read about it somewhere online. She spoke of it casually, like choosing a new color for the living room. Said it would be merciful, that you'd slip away in your sleep painlessly. I said no. That was the only time I ever really defied her. I shouted, called her insane, but even that defiance came from fear, not conscience. She looked at me, and I'll never forget that look. Cold disappointment, like a tool that had failed her. From that day on, I've lived in disgust with her and with myself. That night at the gala, when you showed the photo, I felt something strange, beyond the humiliation, beyond the pain relief. Because finally, the truth was out. The play was over. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I'm not writing this for forgiveness. Your forgiveness would just be another weight I can't carry. And I'm not asking for money. I sold the house. After paying the debts, there's nothing left. I'm renting a small apartment in the suburbs now. I just want one thing. A meeting. One conversation. Not as father and son, but as two men. I want to look you in the eye and say all of this out loud. Then, if you wish, I'll disappear from your life for good. Ethan, I folded the letter. My hands trembled. My anger toward him burned hot, but underneath it ran a glacier of sorrow. I had raised a boy, but a man had never quite emerged. He wasn't a monster. He was worse than emptiness, a person who let fear and insecurity hollow him out until nothing was left. The next morning, I brought the letter to Evelyn. She was at the construction site, helmet on, radiating authority. I handed her the pages. She read in silence, expression still. When she finished, she folded it neatly and gave it back. So, she asked quietly, "What will you do?" I looked out at the open ground where bulldozers were leveling the soil for the foundation. "I spent my whole life building things for that boy," I said. "A company for him to inherit, a house to feel safe in, a future without fear." I turned to her then, and for the first time, I let the fatigue show. I built everything so he could be strong. Maybe that's what made him weak. Maybe my shadow kept the sun off him. Evelyn laid a hand on my arm, gentle but firm. "You can't build someone's character for them, Arthur," she said. "They have to do that themselves." I knew she was right, but the question hung there in the cold morning air, heavier than the letter in my pocket. Was it too late to pour a new foundation? I didn't text him my home address. I didn't send him to Evelyn's office. I told him to meet me here out in the mud and rebar of the construction site where the Hayes Technical Institute would stand. No leather chairs, no expensive whiskey, just the plain, unvarnished truth of work about to begin. This is my world. If he wanted to talk, he had to come to it. He arrived on time, driving an old Honda Civic, not the Mercedes Chloe picked out. He stepped out in pricey leather shoes, looking as out of place as a misfiled blueprint. A cold November wind swept the open lot, carrying the smell of wet earth and cold metal. Mud clung to his cuffs, as if reality itself were trying to pull him down. I didn't walk to him. I stood where I was, a roll of plans in my hand, and waited. He closed the distance. He stopped a few paces away. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes I'd never seen before. He hadn't shaved. For the first time, he looked his age. We stood in silence, the distant excavator the only sound. At last he spoke, voice rough. I'm sorry. Apologies don't fix a weak foundation, Ethan. I said no anger, just fact. They don't cure soft concrete or brittle steel. He nodded, eyes on the ground. I know. Look up, I said. I didn't raise my voice, but it carried command. He lifted his head slowly, and I looked straight into his eyes. I needed to see if anyone was still home in there, or if only a hollow shell remained. You're not a bad man, I said plainly. You're worse. You're weak. And weakness nearly killed your father. Weakness insulted your mother's memory. Weakness doesn't build. It only destroys. Each word landed like a stone, and I watched them strike him. He didn't flinch. He simply took them. I know, he whispered. I'd thought I might feel some grim satisfaction saying it. I didn't. Only a heavy sadness. I'd torn him down. The question now was whether anything could be built back. I didn't hand him money. I didn't offer a hug. I pointed to the open ground around us, to the wooden stakes marking where future walls would rise. Here, I said. Start here. He looked confused. Like an apprentice, I said. Minimum wage. 7 a.m. every day. No privileges. You'll learn to read a plan, tie rebar, pour concrete. You'll learn what your back feels like after a long day, and the quiet satisfaction of a wall that stands true because your hands helped raise it. You'll learn to build something of your own instead of inheriting it. I kept my eyes on his, not letting him look away. 1 year, no vacations unless you're truly sick. If you're still here after a year, if you don't quit, we'll talk again. That was my offer. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. A road. A hard, muddy, maybe hopeless road, but the only one I could give him. Ethan looked at me, then down at his soft hands, hands that had never known a callus. I saw the struggle in his eyes. Wounded pride, humiliation, fear. He could have turned and walked away. I almost expected it, but something shifted. The hesitation drained out. For the first time in his life, I saw a spark of resolve. He drew a long breath, the kind a man takes before diving into cold, deep water. He nodded. A single, deliberate nod. Yes, sir, he said. He didn't call me dad. He called me sir, the way an apprentice addresses the foreman. In that moment, I didn't see a fail sign. I saw a tradesman, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a thread of hope, thin and fragile as wire, but strong enough to start building again. Over 99% of viewers just sat through this story without clicking like or subscribe. Actually, it's easy, just one tap. What time is it in your area and where are you listening? 1 year can change almost everything. A year ago, this ground was nothing but mud and scaffolding. Now, the Hayes Technical Institute stood tall red brick walls and broad glass panes reflecting the clear Chicago sky. The roof was sealed. Electricians and plumbers worked inside, and the place smelled of fresh lumber, wet paint, and possibility. A year had changed my son too. Ethan was no longer the pale, hollow man I'd met here 12 months before. Sun and wind had darkened his skin. Hours of labor had built muscle across his shoulders that no money could buy. His hands were rough, now scarred, calloused, honest. He no longer moved like a man apologizing for existing. He walked with the steady weight of someone who had finally found his footing. He had kept his word. 7 a.m. Every morning, he was among the first to arrive, and usually the last to leave. He'd learned everything from mixing mortar to reading complex blueprints. He didn't talk much, he just worked. And slowly, he earned the respect of the crew, not because he was my son, but because he was one of them. Today was special. No banners, no fanfare, just a small, private ceremony. Me, Evelyn, Ethan, and about a dozen of the main crew. Today, we would set the cornerstone. I saw Ethan cross the site, checking the alignment on window frame, showing a younger worker how to use the level. He was patient, precise. I walked over, my boots echoing on the concrete. "How does it look?" I asked. He turned, calm and confident. "Perfectly straight, sir." We spoke as craftsmen, not as father and son. That was enough. No long apologies, no sentimental speeches, just mutual understanding, built the way all strong things are. One brick at a time. "Good," I said. "It's time." Evelyn waited near the front, beside the polished granite block ready to be set. She looked radiant in a cream coat, her face lit by the morning sunday. Over the past year, she had become more than my attorney. She was my partner, my confidant, the person who helped me rebuild everything. She smiled as we approached. "It looks solid," she said, gazing up at the building. "The foundation's the key," I replied. We exchanged a knowing look. Ours like this buildings had been tested and had held. The site manager nodded. Time to begin. The cornerstone was heavy. It took both me and Ethan to lift it. As we set it into the bed of mortar, our hands brushed rough stone, warm skin, quiet understanding, no words. Just the shared weight of something we'd both helped build. When it was perfectly in place, I stepped back. The inscription carved into its face was simple, deliberate. "The only true legacy is what you build with your hands." Evelyn stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Ethan stood with the crew, awkward but proud. He belonged there. I looked at the structure, not the brick and steel, but the people around me. Evelyn, who taught me that trust can be rebuilt. Ethan, who showed me that even the weakest foundation can be reinforced. And the workers, who reminded me that honest labor still matters. I don't know what the future holds. My relationship with Ethan will never be what it once was. The scars remain, but they're the kind that come from healing, not from wounds still open. And as I stood there beneath the wide Chicago sky, for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the cracks of the past. I was feeling the solidity of the ground beneath my feet. The foundation was down, and it was sound